When you think about security, what comes to mind? Is it financial security? Is it TSA at the airport, metal detectors at concerts, or even mall cops? Is it the comfort of clean sheets, or is it spending time with your family and friends, tending your plants on a Sunday, like me? These are the parts of life that we seek, cherish, and safeguard. What could they possibly have to do with annual meeting, much less foreign policy? Well, my name is Julia Gledhill. I'm the program assistant for militarism and human rights, and these are questions that I ask myself every day. Security to me is good health, a safe community, the closeness of loved ones, and of course, the material comforts that allow me to revel in all of these joys in my life. But this is not what security means in U.S. foreign policy. Militarist logic underpins our understanding of security. This logic depends upon power relations and social hierarchies that perpetuate the idea that security is a condition achieved by force. Militarism confines security threats to incredibly narrow parameters. If it can't be bombed or shot at, it is not a security threat. Now, of course, we all know that this isn't true. Climate change, white supremacy, kleptocracy, and oligarchy threaten individual security and therefore that of our nation. But in the United States, we're indoctrinated with the logic of militarism our entire lives. Militarism shows up in flyovers of fighter jets at sporting events and military recruiters in public schools who promise 17-year-olds a path out of poverty and a college education. The militarization of our society permeates political rhetoric, pop culture, economic priorities, school curriculums, and national identity. So, militarism and national security as we know it are mutually reinforcing concepts. Through a militarist lens, violence is understood as shootings and terrorist attacks. So a militaristic perception of security depends upon a limited understanding of violence, one that centers individual behaviors while ignoring forms of systemic violence, housing insecurity, healthcare insecurity, and food insecurity experienced by millions of Americans. So really, the concept of national security isn't national at all. It's simply a term that the economic elite use to justify military intervention and to veil their own interests in ever-expanding post-9/11 wars. And U.S. foreign policy reflects this. While the U.S. defense budget has steadily grown since the Second World War, so too has the level of corporate influence on foreign policy. Spending seems to be an end in and of itself instead of a means to an end, which would presumably be the preservation of national security. Instead, the economic elite serve their own interests through military intervention abroad while convincing the American people that constant war is the price of freedom. But whose freedom? Is it that of the working class Americans who disproportionately pay the costs of war with their lives? Is it the freedom of at least 37 million people who have been displaced because of wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, the Philippines, Libya, and Syria? Or is it the freedom of at least 800,000 people who have been killed in these post-9/11 wars? Profiteering monopoly capitalists wage wars for which they pay none of the costs as a matter of national security. In short, militarism poisons us. The militarist lens obfuscates our global horizon and therefore the pathway to peace. Militarism is also ineffective in combating terrorism. Foreign military intervention has stoked anti-American resentment and radicalization to extremist violence worldwide. The over-reliance on military action has also fueled the violence and political instability critical to enduring conflict, which remains the primary driver of terrorism. Afghanistan, where the United States wages its longest war, replaced Iraq as the country most affected by terrorism in 2018. Adjusted for inflation, we've spent more reconstructing Afghanistan than we did on the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe after World War II. All the while, Afghanistan remains one of the most dangerous countries in the world to be a civilian. At home, the economically and politically powerful fail across the ideological spectrum to end forever wars. They continue to pour money into counterterrorism operations that don't work and that actually make civilians in conflict zones more vulnerable to terrorist attacks. National security to me is not a condition to be reached. It's a constant fight for the security of Americans. Security means protection from terrorist threats, but also housing, healthcare, and food security. I do this work because I believe that national security is human security, and that at its core, national security reflects the scope of opportunity afforded to those most affected by the physical and systemic violence perpetrated at home and through U.S. military operations abroad.